I'm not here to talk about bees, nor am I here to kick a hornet's nest.
Hey! Don't kirk out on me, man!
Hi, I'm LadyJenevia, and on my channel I like to talk about entertainment media. I wanted to make this its own separate video. Now, admittedly, the topic might have somewhat fit into the previous video that I've recorded and probably published. That is, if I publish these videos in the order I think that I'm going to. Mind you, I'm pre-recording and prepping a lot of Bridgerton Season 3 videos. There are other videos I will have already written and probably recorded too by the time you watch this upload, but some of them I'm not going to be editing until after Season 3 Part 1 is released to the masses, because for those videos I would like to be able to use clips as evidentiary support for the topics being discussed in them. But for now, I think you are watching this video after I've uploaded a video sharing my speculations about the over-dramatization of the plot on Netflix's Bridgerton. If it's a pollen season, I just want to see Colin and Penelope hanging out and talking about their feelings. But my speculation was that Netflix higher-ups are responsible for pushing too much drama into the love story that simply doesn't need to be there. But for this video, I want to talk about how I am personally speculating that Netflix is responsible for the misuse or perhaps the underutilization of Kate and Anthony in Season 3. Now, let me be really clear before we get into all of that. Do not send hate to any of the actors from the show, and don't send hate to creatives either, because none of us, including myself, really know what's going on behind the scenes. If I did know, I wouldn't be sharing it because it's not my place to reveal those things, and I also just don't want the headache that would come from being someone to spread something secondhand on the internet. If someone who works on the show decides to come forward and say something, well then that is their decision to do so. But I don't work on the show. I'm just a person on the internet with a lot of opinions and a special needs cat. But before we speculate and unpack feelings about airtime distribution for characters on a TV series, I want to remind everyone that donation links for Palestine and bail funds for university students are in the description box. You can also stream Macklemore's protest song, HIND'S HALL, and all the streaming proceeds will be donated to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. Hopefully, if you're watching this, you are not new, but if you are, I have already spoken at length across multiple videos that the Mines subplot in Season 2 was bad, and Cantony were in fact sidelined in their own season. I'm not involved in, nor am I interested in participating in any feuds on the internet between ships. I have zero issues with setting up Colin in Season 2 to be the lead of Season 3. Anthony had a setup in Season 1 to be the lead of Season 2, and all of that was perfectly fine. What we did not need was Portia and What's-His-Face getting all that extra airtime. That subplot should have been cut down in airtime, and most of that airtime should have gone to Colin and Penelope specifically, because they are the ones that actually mattered to the story. Now, I don't want to go in depth about all of that again, but on the offhand chance that any of you are new to my channel and this is the first video you're watching, that's the abbreviated version I've just given you, the recap of all of what I've already said. I'm not someone that is on a team per se for Cantony or Pollen, because what I ultimately want is for romantic fiction in general to win and to be revived on a larger scale in Hollywood, and I also want the downfall of capitalism.
Of course, everyone is gonna be on strike because that's how I like us.
And that actually is a sort of segue into what I want to talk about briefly in this video, that being the topic of the amount of airtime, the amount of material in the season for Kate and Anthony as now Viscount and Viscountess. I'm outlining and recording this video ahead of the Season 3 Part 1 premiere, so I'm not reacting to things in real time, but I think I can make an educated guess that there will be some backlash. I think there are going to be fans who are extraordinarily upset that Kate and Anthony are not in as many episodes, that there is not more of a deeper exploration of their material, and so on and so forth. I am not going to talk about their material for Part 2 because I do not want to be reprimanded for breaking review embargoes. Maybe other reporters can break embargoes, and maybe they can reveal massive plot points that were absolutely on the do not reveal list that I have sitting in my email inbox, and maybe those reporters can face zero consequences as a result, even though they didn't even remove the leaks or at the very least set what they leaked to private on their channels. But I don't think I would be forgiven so easily if I were to have as much audacity as those maybe reporters that maybe did that. I want to make it clear that I do not believe that the minimal amounts of Kate and Anthony are about something like feuds or favoritism, about ships. I think in my personal speculation that there is a lot more to consider than just some writers resonating with some couples' stories more than others. I've said in other videos that something you have to consider is that after a main couple gets their turn, those actors will presumably have other job opportunities in show business, and I do believe that they should be free to pursue those without feeling obligated or outright forced to stay on Bridgerton. You're only one person, and if there's a schedule conflict, even if I loved your love story, I want you as an artist to be able to spread your wings and take other jobs. The only asterisk I've given in past Bridgerton videos is that whenever Netflix's Bridgerton finishes and they do a final season, I would like for all of the performers to come back and make appearances as a big celebratory send-off to the show and those characters that we've gotten invested in over how many years it will have been by that point. But another thing I had not thought about as much until I did my interview segment with Josh Levy for my sidelining of Benedict Bridgerton video, and all of that was dusting off the cobwebs of my memories and trains of thought that I've had from following television more in the past than I tend to do nowadays. Unfortunately, I think we need to talk about money.
We're artists, but it's also commerce. It's also business. It's budgets. It's all these things of like, we're willing to give X actor X amount of money, but that's Y actor's too expensive. We're not going to bring them back, right?
It's the ugly, filthy, unwelcome cloud overshadowing the entire creative process in Hollywood, but hear me out. We are coming off of a simultaneous SAG and WGA strike. We had stories being published about workers in other show business departments considering going on strike whenever their next opportunity is for their unions to vote about contracts, deals, and so on and so forth. If you are the stars of Netflix's Bridgerton, you're in the top 2 billed actors of more or less the biggest show in the world when it's released. You deserve a raise in your salary if you're going to come back. Think about all the stories that were coming out in the trades of people from SAG and WGA explaining how the Netflix deals have significantly harmed them. They have a lack of proper residual payments. The fact that Korean actors had to come forward and say that they are not being paid any residuals from their Netflix work, even though we know how popular the K-dramas are on Netflix as a platform. Why haven't more of us pondered the idea that maybe part of the reason why the former leads are either not returning at all or they're only coming back a small amount is because the people who sign the checks don't want to pay those actors fair wages. It is completely unacceptable for any of us to think that the actors should return just because the show is popular and just because we as the audience like to watch the show, we've gotten invested in the characters or the relationship, that love story. If you've watched season 3 part 1, you will have seen Colin and Penelope talk about the first time their characters met. Why didn't we see a scene of that?
I was assaulted by a devilishly yellow head covering.
It was not my fault. The wind blew it clean off my head.
I know that I've talked about how unacceptable it was that we didn't get to see flashback scenes of Kate and the Sharma family in general, but we're getting to a Pollen season, and even they didn't get flashbacks that I think would have made sense to see for their story. Sure, you can play around with the argument that we've already seen those characters for 2 seasons, but the scene of how they met, that's kind of a big deal. And it is a scene in the book. I have zero doubt about the fact that surely Pollen fans would have wanted to see that play out in live action. A verbal retelling is fine, but it would have been so much cuter to actually get to see them meet and have this cinematic presentation of younger Penelope falling in love basically immediately, since that's how it was presented in the book. Season 1 had those flashback scenes for Simon, but another thing to consider is that season 1 was filmed before the pandemic. I would imagine the way that a budget gets used on a production is different post-2020 for a film or series. I haven't kept up with everything in close detail because I've been busy prepping these videos, taking care of and saying goodbye to the foster cats. While you're watching this, I'm probably alone crying in my room because I've just said goodbye to them. But I have seen a couple of quotes floating around, and people are saying that there are inconsistencies of quotes given where the plan was to bring certain actors back to Bridgerton or have the stories be more developed than what was ultimately going to happen in season 3. Is it possible that people lied about their intentions? Sure. Is it possible that decisions made by Netflix on a higher corporate level forced people's hands and things had to change, and the creative people are the ones that have to actually do interviews with the press and answer questions? Sure. Is it possible that negotiations broke down because of fair salary increases and budget limitations? Sure. I ultimately don't know what happened, and I'm not claiming to know in this video. I'm merely thinking about this out loud on YouTube, a public platform, because I would like for the people who watch the show and put a lot of energy into following the ongoings of whether it's this show or anything else, to think about the possibilities of other variables that could potentially be at play that we don't necessarily think of. I want to give another example that's unrelated to Bridgerton. How many of you know who Harold Perrineau is? He's an icon, he's a legend, he was Mercutio in drag. I I literally submitted an RSVP to a junket for a show called From that I didn't even know existed until I got the invitation in my email, and I saw Harold Perrineau's name, and I immediately wanted in because I'm a Baz Luhrmann girly.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Harold. This was a real fangirl moment for me, and I had a great time, so I will not be wishing a plague on your house today.
Well, I appreciate that.
A plague on both your houses!
So Harold Perrineau in the Y2K era had a bigger name, he had career momentum, he had the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet, he was in The Matrix 2 and 3, and so when the people developing Lost were trying to gather talent, get bigger names to book for the show, they got Harold Perrineau, and this was considered to be a big deal. Harold has since come out many years after the fact, and he has given a detailed recounting of how he was increasingly sidelined in the story and unceremoniously discarded by the show and the people making it, and it was part of a larger pattern of racism for Lost as a series. And I can't say as much about that because I never watched Lost, but I do remember when this expose was unleashed on film and television Twitter, and of course I had to read it because it involved Harold Perrineau. Now, that situation is not a one-to-one comparison to Netflix's Bridgerton, but I merely bring this up to point out how there was no regard for how this is an actor that has earned a level of respect and salary. The industry machine was more than ready to spit him out as if he wasn't an icon, and he still is an icon, and I know that. But we need to remember that it took several years for that information to come out, meaning that for all those years, the audience, whether you were a hardcore fan of Lost or at the very least a consistent viewer who watched the show regularly, but maybe you weren't partaking in message boards because you were grown and you had responsibilities. As far as I'm aware, the majority of people did not know about all of these shady ongoings behind the scenes. There were far more variables at play than what the fans were aware of, because that's basically always the case with show business. I think social media is creating an illusion for avid fans of entertainment fiction, whether that's for Netflix's Bridgerton or something else entirely, that they think they know what's going on. They think that if they pay enough attention to what's printed or recorded or published for the masses, that they will ultimately be able to deduce what's going on behind the scenes for Bridgerton in the writer's room, in boardroom meetings, on set. And I don't think any of us, including me, has any idea what's going on to lead to the more, shall we say, controversial decisions about how these stories are adapted and which characters or actors are given more material to work with. Do things like racism, homophobia, misogyny, and so on and so forth also have a role to play in how actors are treated in the industry, what material they are given when they're meant to be the leads of the show? Of course, I'm not making any claims about to what extent those biases might have played into the amount that Kate and Anthony's material was prioritized in seasons 2 or 3. But I wanted to bring up the money issue because I don't feel like I've seen that brought up as much by the fandom, or at least from the few viral tweets that have ended up on my feed. We know that Regé-Jean was excluded from the same level of consideration to play Superman's father on the show Krypton, which he auditioned for, specifically because of his ethnicity. And that was a story I remember going viral when it was revealed to the masses. But I really would like for viewers that are actively engaged and closely following the ongoings of entertainment fiction, whether it's Netflix's Bridgerton or other series or films, to give more consideration to the greed of the industry and these business executives that have far more say in things than they deserve. I think a lot of us are aware of the discriminatory biases and actions related to being part of various marginalized identity groups, but never ever underestimate the greed of business folks that infiltrate and poison the arts. Now, at the time of recording this video, I've probably recorded anywhere between 2 to 4 other Bridgerton season 3 videos, but have not fully edited them yet. But I'm assuming that by the time you watch this, my sidelining of Benedict Bridgerton video is up. And I do recommend that you watch that and listen to my interview with Josh Levy, because even though that interview was about an hour long, my plan for editing it is to trim it down to just share the key parts for you to better understand how much more complex the process is for making television than a lot of us realize unless we investigate it. I'm not saying that it's wrong to be unhappy with the execution of a television series, an adaptation from book to screen, but in my honest opinion, I think that if you really want more change to be made for not only Netflix's Bridgerton, but a lot of entertainment fiction, you have to do things like support the organization and mobilization of workers so that they do not have to deal with so much corporate meddling, that they don't have to worry about unfair wages infiltrating and affecting the process, and other things of that nature that have a negative impact on how these stories get to be told. I adore the work that Jonathan Bailey and Simone Ashley did for season 2, and I would have absolutely loved to see more of them in season 3. 3, but I don't know what they were offered financially, and if there's even a possibility that they weren't being offered a fair pay relative to the success that their labor helped to create. I don't think it's fair for me to just selfishly demand that they be around for less money, if that was what happened. And I don't know if that was the reason. I know they've been getting booked for a lot of other jobs, and maybe that was also just impacting their availability for being able to film during season 3. But what they did was truly incredible, and they should be paid accordingly on not only Bridgerton, but on every other job that they book.
Another thing that actually influences things, and I don't think anybody really knows about this unless you've been in TV or, production, the amount of characters in a scene. Anytime you add like one actor to the scene, it adds like 15 minutes to like shooting time. If you get, and it's almost logarithmic where it keeps going to like, it keeps like going up and up and up. Imagine this. You want all 8 characters, in a scene. Maybe they're sitting around a dinner table or dancing or things like that. You have to cover, by covering, I mean have the camera on them, close up, medium shot, wide shot of each and every character so the edit can put them in. You have to corral all these actors, these costumes, the makeup, especially Bridgerton. Again, haven't seen the series like this season, but that makeup and costume, that takes so much time. So a lot of people are quite disappointed by saying, well, I want to see, 6 to 8 characters in this scene and I want to see everybody else. And I'm like, that's impossible. We as producers of TV, we don't have the time for that. We're not Game of Thrones, we don't have a $100 million budget per episode or whatever the heck they do. We have to go by what's real. And unfortunately, as much as we want to have all of these fun characters together working off each other, stolen glances to one another, little moments, it basically becomes kind of impossible as you record. So interestingly enough, production, the realism of actually putting something from script to screen actually influences the overall tone and all of these different things, because we got to actually shoot this. We can't wait 8 hours for one scene.
And with this being Colin and Penelope's season, assuming that this season is also successful, Nicola, Coughlan, and Luke Newton absolutely deserve to have a salary increase for the acting that they do following this season's release. Now, whether that's them popping back up in season 4 or other Bridgerton seasons or booking other film or television projects, I'm assuming their profile is going to be significantly raised by being the main love story for Bridgerton season 3. Seasons 1 and 2 were enormously successful, so I have no reason to assume that season 3 won't also have high success. If I had the power to wave a magical wand and change Bridgerton in a way that would hopefully smooth out a lot of these issues, I would do a few things. Fair wages for everyone, not just the actors, but everyone in every department. Not just the upfront salaries, but significantly increase the residuals to something that's actually fair. More episodes per season. I think 13 is ideal since the ensemble is so large, but even bumping it up to 10 would help out. Furthermore, release the episodes 1 week at a time. So with more episodes and fair wages all around, I think it would be a lot easier to let previous leads come back here and there. There is a really cute scene between Colin and Daphne in book 4, and it's not a spoiler for me to say that Phoebe has already stated on the record that she will not be returning for season 3. Phoebe has been doing well in her career. She's been booking jobs, and I'm assuming you've all seen by now with part 1 that Bridgerton is extremely overcrowded. If I was living in a fantastical dream world, I love the idea of Phoebe, Regé-Jean Page, Jonathan, Simone, and now Nicola and Luke Newton to be able to still be on the show after they get their main turn, even if it's just for a scene or two, like that Daphne Colin scene in book 4. But given the material conditions that currently exist for creatives in Hollywood, I think that there's just no way to get things the exact way we as the audience would love for them to be. I would have loved to revisit everything that was scrapped and should not have been scrapped for Kate in season 2 and put those scenes and storylines back into season 3. However, if you watched my sidelining of Benedict Bridgerton video, you will already know that my stance is that they couldn't even give Benedict a proper storyline, and most of the fans are heavily speculating that Benedict is going to be the lead Bridgerton of season 4. So if they were not able to give a real interesting storyline for the maybe next main character for the entire season, why do we think that they would be able to find room to give quality, meaningful material to Daphne, Simon, Kate, and Anthony on top of everything else? Let alone being able to pay those people what they should be paid. If you ask my id, my pure id, Sure, I would love to get self-indulgent and just get to see what I want to see from the characters that I love, like Kate Sharma and Anthony Bridgerton. But rational me knows that money and scheduling are very easily and very likely variables that can and do heavily impact the production process in Hollywood.
You know, a lot of fan service is driven by social media. There are a lot of times where the network analytics will break down percentages from Twitter.
So what you're saying is, if somebody needs to get more airtime, people should talk more about them online.
I am absolutely no, I'm absolutely saying that.
Now, hopefully, if you've made it this far, you know that I do not intend any hate towards any of the actors, any of the screenwriters, basically anyone trying to be creative for a living under late stage capitalism when you've got a mega corporation sending you terrible notes with terrible ideas, but you have to entertain their horrible feedback because they're the ones that are footing the bill. You have my sympathies. Truly, I say that with no sarcasm. Please do not send hate to creatives, even if they have a different favorite character or ship than you. I can more or less guarantee that a lot of those people are doing the best that they can. It's always the corporate big tech people making the problems nowadays. And most of the time, I don't think we even know the names of those people that are creating the problems. And you know what? Since I know there are always things we wish we could see more of that don't make it into the main show, I encourage all of you to write fan fiction and support fan fiction writers. They do a lot of free labor out of purely love. So if any of you would like to support fics that cover things you would like to see on the show that were not on the show, feel free to exchange them either in my comment section or amongst yourselves on your various social media fan pages. Just make sure that if you are going to share them in my comments, do not post the links because links get filtered out automatically by YouTube as spam. Just share information like title, the website, the author, the main ship, and whether or not it's NSFW.
Come in. Take your pants off.
Let's try not to leave this video with a bunch of negative emotions. Let's feel motivated to become informed about the logistics of how the machine works, or find yourself a nice fic to enjoy that will fill in the blanks of whatever you feel like the show didn't get to that you would have liked to see. Anyway, if I upload these videos in the order I think I'm going to, the next video should be coming fairly soon, and you will finally get to hear some of my thoughts about book 4. It will not be a video that goes the way you maybe think that it would have. But I've also got other season 3 Bridgerton videos I'm going to be working on. But like I said, I will not be able to edit those until after season 3 part 1 comes out because I want to use episode footage. So just keep an eye out and make sure you subscribe. Help me hit that 30K milestone. It's a big goal of mine. And thank you again to my patrons. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.